So let me give you life advice on taking life advice.
We're going to go meta with it. Everyone's down in the weeds giving life advice. We're going to give advice about life advice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here to do today. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Do Less podcast. Brendan, John, and Jeff. If you guys are watching live on YouTube, and you're very attentive, you may have noticed we're in our same outfits from last month's podcast. Because we're in reality we're recording 2 in one night here. So, flavor of the day today. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of self-help or self-improvement gurus and genre of kind of books, podcasts, YouTube videos.
Self-help or self-hurt?
It's kind of become a super popularized category, I would say, kind of in the last 5 to 10 years. Now, I don't have a whole lot of data for what I'm saying here, but it felt like to me, growing up in kind of the 90s, early 2000s, the category of quote-unquote self-help was sort of stigmatized for people that have something wrong going with their lives, alcoholics or someone that has some issue that they need fixing. I think that stemmed a lot from the sort of baby boomer generation being a generation of, don't ask for help, figure it out, you have a problem, you go fix it. And now I've seen that topic or genre move towards become less stigmatized by the millennial generation, which I think is generally a very positive trend. It's now, I think people take the perspective of not only are things like, going to therapy and mental health and those things are now no longer stigmatized, but actually have a very positive spin on them from, I think, people, the younger generation. I think that's great as a general trend. And to go even more generally, I'm someone who is always trying to work on self and improving every aspect of my life as I can. I think everyone should take that approach, trying to sculpt their life towards a better and better improvement. Because if you're not, I think you're probably either going backwards or you're just too full of yourself to think you don't need it. But that being said, I think nowadays it's become such a popularized topic that there's almost too much content out there, and people making a living off of being lifestyle gurus. And I think there's a lot of bullshit and nonsense to sift through if you're really looking to learn a lot about, what's the best diet or exercise out there. I think you can kind of get caught in the wash if you are really just trying to Google, how do I stay productive, or, how do I wake up less tired? There's a million different resources out there for those kind of things, which is generally great, but there's almost too much to the point of paralysis. And I think, just to give a couple of examples, you could look up a specific diet, like intermittent fasting or something like that, that's become popular lately, and say, you can see a lot of really good resources and smart people, athletes, endorsing a diet like that, saying, this is increased my energy levels, testosterone levels, et cetera. But if you look far enough, you're going to find some counterpoints, and then now you're not sure if it's a good diet, and so then you don't start the diet and you never try it in the first place. Or you can spend 3 hours on YouTube watching videos on how to be more productive and not waste your time as much. And so they can really, you can shoot yourself in the foot by kind of over researching your problems and finding too many people out there trying to give you advice. Because there's always going to be a counterexample. There's always going to be some better system, if you want to figure out why your energy levels are low during the day, you'll find someone telling you it's your sleep, it's your caffeine, it's your diet, it's your exercise, it's your mental state, you're not meditating, whatever.
Or you're just ugly.
And so if there's like 20 different reasons, there's 20 different things you can do to improve a single problem, you might not end up doing any of them. And so I think I find myself sometimes having that problem where I'm, looking to improve a certain aspect of my life, like let's say, sleep or energy or whatever. And you find so many resources out there that you kind of get paralysis by analysis and end up doing nothing. So I think that can be a problem that people need to be wary of. I think the other thing people should think about when looking for those kind of life advice type of topics is to look to see if the resource you're getting it from, like the YouTuber or whatever, is someone who's like making a living off of making those kind of videos. Because then you have to ask yourself, like, is this video a bunch of nonsense where they're just, you look at their page and there's lifestyle gurus, like I said, who literally are making a living off of like giving you advice, and that doesn't mean it's not all good, but you should be careful about what resources you're looking for out there. And I think
unless you're on social media learning about social media influencers who are doing well on social media, then you're safe. Jeff, you go.
So I was just going to say, so this podcast is going to be about why you should give us money and not those other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me give you life advice on taking life advice.
We're going to go meta with it. Everyone's down in the weeds giving life advice. We're going to give advice about life advice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here to do today.
Whole new derivative market, this is groundbreaking stuff here.
Right.
Going above their heads here. But yeah, no, I think so. My two main points there, just to summarize, like, I think it's a positive trend that our generation's now really painted a positive light towards like working on self-improvement. I think that's awesome. But I think there's so many resources out there that I think a lot of people talk the talk, but don't end up actually like implementing these things into their lives because there's almost too many solutions and too many kind of contradicting evidence for whatever you want to look for out there. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that generally, but
I have the opposite take. I think that means we're weak and our spawn will surely not survive the winter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Bill Gates wasn't Googling how to be more productive.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
It's like, I mean, all right. So advice on taking advice is, my rule of thumb is it's very strong. Yeah, it's the Lindy effect, which is Nassim Nicholas Taleb has a book. Which one? What's the book?
I don't know which one Lindy is.
Black Swan? No.
I don't know. He has a bunch of books.
Yeah. All right. Well, the Lindy effect is actually named after a person, I believe, but that's not important. The important part is the longer something's been around, the more likely it's worth its salt. The more likely it's going to be around. So it kind of actually takes a mathematical approach, like the expected value of observation of a trend, of some sort of idea, of some sort of not organic is like the key. It's like obviously like meat in your fridge is going to spoil. So it's like, don't think of it. It's like things that can last the test of time. So books, ideas, habits.
Things without half-lives, essentially.
Yeah, things that kind of can support themselves just by their efficacy. Yeah, so the odds that you're witnessing them at a stage, or when you're witnessing them, the odds are it's at halfway through its life cycle. Okay, so that's just a rule of thumb. It's not a rule. It's not a hard rule where it's like, oh, I've, this kind of manufacturing process for plastic is 10 years old, so that means that it's going to be around for 10 more years. No, it's not like hard like that. It's not like a hard fact, but it's like,
so
it's a heuristic.
It's a heuristic.
If I can simplify what you're saying is, if some idea or advice has been around for a long time, there's a better chance that it has some truth to it.
Right.
Whereas any brand new advice, the chances that it's accurate and helpful are just lower because there's been less time for it to be ruled out or
Right.
counterexampled.
Yeah, like there's 10,000 books that were released last month, and probably one of them, or it maybe even one of them, has something that's going to be worthwhile in 100 years from now. But
Hmm.
there's, probably 2,000 books that you can read today at your library probably that were written 100 years ago. It's like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between, well, already that the books that were written 100 years ago that you can find today that people still read today, it's like there's a reason people still read them. And the odds that you find the book that was written last month that's worth its salt and it will be written or will be still read 100 years from now, it's very low. It's just a numbers game. It doesn't mean you can't read more recent not more recent concepts about recent concepts, but if you want to be safe, or if you want to at least use this heuristic, you know towards things that you see online, things that you read, you say, is this similar to something that was written 100 years ago, or is this a completely new concept? Stuff like that. Just using that as a benchmark will allow you to kind of filter out a lot of the trendy kind of attention grabbing, attention seeking stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
to play devil's advocate though, I agree, right? It seems like self help has become its own sort of industry. You have like all these gurus online who basically do nothing but give other people advice, and then it's sort of like, why am I taking your advice if all you do is give advice? Like,
Right.
shouldn't you have some thing you've achieved that I want to achieve as well? But beyond that point, to play devil's advocate, um, I don't know. It seems like a lot of what people need is just something that gets them in motion, right? It's because basically,
Totally.
as long as you're making incremental progress, you know, you know, key thing progress, as long as you're not going backwards, if it's incrementally forwards, you're gonna get better, right? So as long as you're just improving, that's good. So if there's just if you're looking for that thing, that sort of idea, that philosophy, that piece of information, whatever it might be, I think everyone's sort of different, and different people look at sort of what gets them out of bed to essentially make incremental gains towards their goals differently. And so just finding that thing, that little nugget of wisdom that can help you do that, maybe it merits lots of permutations because there's lots more people now today than there ever were before. And so maybe just, if someone phrases it the right way, where it's like, okay, I'm going to get out of bed and do something today rather than, just not just calling sick or whatever, then I think there's value there just in the fact that it sort of resonates with you, I guess.
Yeah. I very much agree with that. Just that reminds me a lot of. I just heard it on a recent podcast, and I should go back and quote who it is because they deserve the credit for it. But that reminds me a lot of a point I wanted to bring up that really two things. Number one, like everyone's different, and different things are going to work for different people. So one person giving advice online or in a book, it may or may not apply to you, and may or may not work for you. But the number one thing you should do is just go try it, experiment, be a self experimenter, try new things. Stick to it for a week or two, and if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. At least you tried, and now you know, and you can rule it out. And what I thought was a really interesting way this was presented in this podcast is, maybe this is corny, but that the opposite of distraction is not, when it comes to trying to avoid procrastination and stay focused, was that the opposite of distraction is not focus, but it's just the word traction, right? So just take the dis off. It's just traction and just getting back on track, and that all stems from the word action. So like step one, if you want to avoid distraction, just go act, right? Just like separate from whatever is distracting you and just take action and go do it. Like whatever step one is, whether or not you want to be doing it. just go do it. And if you want to, try a new diet, try a new exercise, most important thing is to just go try it. And if you like it, great, it'll work, maybe it'll stick. And if you don't, maybe it doesn't, and that's fine too. But step one is to just go take action and not look for reasons not to try it in the first place.
I like that. I like the action, emphasis on action. I kind of disagree with. I mean, I know you're referencing someone else, so maybe it's not fair to push back on you. But I disagree with the idea that like, oh, if you try it and you don't like it, then that's fine. Go try something else. Because I think like that kind of mentality is almost like, you get you get this idea that you can just like, if I'm not instantly having fun or instantly enjoying something, then it's like a lot of things that are worth your time are like going to be terrible at the beginning.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it's more likely to be, the more worthwhile something is, the more likely you're going to have to forego present satisfaction for future, delayed gratification.
Sure.
So I think that I just like tend to think that like if you're listening to someone online and they're making you happy, it's like you should not listen to them, because you shouldn't be happy listening to someone online. You should be happy doing something, getting results. So if you listen to someone who actually makes you feel like crap, then keep listening to that person, because they're going to make you do something about it.
You're going to kill all our viewerships with that comment, John.
Well, no, because
No, we make all our viewers feel terrible. So this is a good idea.
True. It feels extremely
This is like Inception.
I think that's partly true, partly not true.
I know you hate listening to us, and it's good.
But that's good.
Keep doing it.
Yeah, I think you have a good point there. Like, there's, especially with things like diet and exercise, they're like uncomfortable, and you have to like fight your mind's desire not to go the other way. But my only point was that the key is just like taking action and trying it, rather than staying put and not trying it because you're looking for a reason not to. I thought another like really interesting point that came up on this podcast, and so by the end of this I'll quote it so people can go listen to it.
It'll be in the show notes.
Was that this is just another on that same topic of distraction and procrastination. Was that like distraction is more often than not comes from an internal source rather than an external source. So there's some obvious things, like if there's construction going on outside or some gunshots, that's like an obvious external distraction. But when you go away from your work to go look at social media or fold laundry because you don't feel like doing whatever task you have to do, it's actually like an internal, the distraction's coming from something internal. And what you're actually doing, whether you can have identified it or not, is it's your mind looking to avoid some internal discomfort that is stemming from whatever task you are trying to stay focused on. And this maybe doesn't apply to every scenario, but I found it helpful for me. So when I find myself like, actually it's me seeking out distraction because I don't want to be working on the thing that I'm working on. And oftentimes that's because there's something about it that's making me uncomfortable. And maybe that is because I don't know how to do it, and so it's going to take a lot of mental effort. Maybe it's because I don't know what the next step is that I have to take, and so I'm going to have to try to figure it out. But in any case, what I've learned to do now and I've been trying to practice and found useful is that when I start to get distracted, I stop for a second and just realize that emotion that's like happening in my body that's leading me to seek out distraction. And it is like this kind of weird feeling of discomfort. And then I think just stopping to identify the source of that emotion is like a huge first step in being like, wait a minute, I don't need to be doing that. Okay, let's get back on the task. Or asking yourself why it's making you feel that way is really useful in kind of overcoming the desire to seek out distraction. And I've found that personally really useful.
Yeah, that like aspect of like mindfulness. I listened to a guy, I forgot who it was also, but he said like study yourself like a bug, or study yourself like, as if you were a bug that you're studying. So like if you're studying a bug, you would like give it some water. Oh, you give him too much water, he does this. You give him too much food, or you give him this, too much light. And you just keep track of everything that he does based on what stimulus you've given it. It's like, well, do that for yourself. And it's kind of a weird thing to think about. It's like, but you can, if you think about it that way, it's like a whole different way to look at your day. It's like, oh, today I had to do this progress report, and I hate doing progress report. And oh yeah, by the way, it took me 4 hours to do something that should take me 15 minutes, and I only worked on it for 15 minutes. The other 3.5 hours, 3 hours and 45 minutes were spent, talking with someone and calling this person and doing this stuff that's not really important. It's just like, make note of that and be like, oh yeah, like I really don't like those progress reports. So next time it comes up, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to be distracted because I don't like to do it. I don't actually do that, but I think that's a good thing to do.
See, I take the opposite approach, right? So our instincts have been around forever, right? They've helped us survive. So whenever I get an instinct not to do what I'm doing, I'm like, that must be right. It's been around forever. So I should not do what I'm doing, and I should do.
I think you.
That's a good point.
Knowing that you're joking there, I actually think there is something to be said about that, and I think that is that like they are these biological emotions because like something doesn't feel good to do sometimes, and I think those like biological construction of our brain is now like just doesn't apply well to the type of tasks we have to do today, right? So like we didn't evolve to have to like type emails to a coworker we don't like and some bullshit, right? So like those things we might like intentionally avoid doing or unintentionally avoid doing because it makes us uncomfortable.
But one step further, maybe that says that like the system of emailing people is inefficient. That's actually what Cal Newport says. He's like, email is like the single greatest productivity killer. Like the fact that you can just ping someone at any minute of the day and just be like, try to garner their attention. It's like, who thought that? Like no one actually consciously thought that was like a way to design the business world and be effective. Like that's just a complete like. So I mean, maybe it is. To Jeff's point, it's like maybe our bodies are telling us something when we're completely.
I'm just so out of my element here because like I am terrible at like focusing on things. Like sometimes I'm really good at it. I get like bursts where I can like focus on a single thing for literally like 12 hours straight and like get it done. But it's like I sort of have to be interested in it. Like it has to be like a problem I want to solve, or I'm just not. I'm just not going to be good at it. So I don't know. I feel like I have no input here.
I think a point to be made there though is especially when you work for somebody else, like most people do, the tasks that you procrastinate and avoid are always like the ones you don't feel like doing or the ones that aren't interesting. But those tasks are still going to like hang over your head and weigh on your shoulders. And like in those moments when you really just don't feel like doing it and you're going to like be unproductive instead of doing that high priority item you don't feel like doing, that is like the moment that I'm trying to be better at stopping and reflecting and saying, okay, my options are continue procrastinating and let this continue to weigh on my shoulders over the long run, or go get it done now as much as I don't feel like doing it and, avoid the additional pain of having it hang over my shoulders and having to do it later with less time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I have like deadlines, my natural inclination is to wait till the last possible second to do the thing until the stress has accumulated so high that I have no choice but to act, or I will literally like go into cardiac arrest from excess stress. So
100%, I do the same thing.
So it's just like I don't know, whatever reason, that's how I like. There's always people who will say, when you get the book report for school or whatever, start the day they assign it, right? And then just do it a little each day.
Like,
and it's
yeah,
like,
like
I've
you-
never done that.
I've never done that. Like, maybe you do put together a better book report if you do that. I've never tried.
I know. I don't know what it is about me, but I can't operate that way. I don't know why.
Same. But just to go back to the podcast I've been quoting, was from the Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish, episode 104 with Nur Ayal. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but go watch it. I'll share it with you guys.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's a lot of way smarter people than us that I think give really good just advice about mental models, productivity, things like that. Like, I don't know. There's a whole plethora of one. If you guys are interested, we can maybe build that for you. That people we found. I think the one guy, if we're just going to give one person, I would say has the most impact on me personally was Naval Ravikant. Because I wouldn't say he gives advice about like self-help or anything like that, but he is sort of a guru in some ways.
Yeah.
Where like he just kind of changed my entire philosophy on life almost. Where it was basically, I feel, and I, this is maybe on a tangent, but I feel like our school system kind of programs people a certain way, and I do eventually want to do a whole podcast about our education system, but I think it programs you where essentially
like a whole episode or a whole podcast series of episodes.
Honestly,
Both.
The latter.
Yeah.
But like when I think back to school, it gets you in this mindset of just essentially do what you're told and you'll be rewarded. Essentially, right? It's like they give you homework and you do the homework and you get a grade. They're like, here's the test. Here's exactly what will be on it. Here's exactly what you need to know. And you have these very closed problems, right? It's not at all what it's like to like be a productive person unless you're, I don't know, maybe some jobs are more like just task oriented like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to be fair, in like the modern age, that doesn't make you like a well-rounded and useful or interesting person, but you can go function working for a lot of bosses. By,
right.
Like
I'm not saying you can't. All right, maybe productive is the wrong word because I think you can be productive if you do that, but
you're not going to be creative.
Yeah, you're not going to be. You're not going to be solving any open-ended problems in this line of thinking. And just my whole life, it was like, okay, I got to get good grades so that I can get into a good college, and I need to get into a good college so that I can get a good job. And then if I have a good job, I'll be happy. And it's just like, that was basically like the whole framework I had been sort of set into. And then suddenly I kind of realized, partially due to Naval, partially just my own experience, is that you can just create value yourself. And your time can be valuable because you're creating new things that people want. And I'm not saying I'm there yet, but that's what I'm striving to be, is not someone who just says, okay, what do I do next? But like, here's ways I can add value and can be valuable to other people. And then people will want to work with me, want to, I don't know, what have you. But it trade with me, buy my product, whatever it might be, and that's just a whole entirely different path of life, where you're being creative and you're doing things you want to do that you deem valuable, that can make you successful and independent. That has nothing to do with essentially pleasing anyone else, right? Like the whole other path I had outlined was like, I gotta do well by my teachers. I got to do well by my college so that they can recommend me. And then my employer has to think of me favorably. And it's just like, it's this whole track of just thinking where it's like, I'm doing what someone else wants me to do. And it's all about performing according to their metrics. And I'm not saying I've achieved the alternative. I by no means have not. But I'm saying even just the idea that there's this alternative out there where you can create for yourself, or not for yourself, but you can create essentially value in the world that people could want and that could sustain you. Just like, I don't know, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because
And
I
I
had
think
never
it's important to note that how much more fulfilling of a life that is too.
Right, at least I think so.
I think anyone would think so,
Yeah.
Just being like an independent creator is just such a different life than from being the cog in the wheel. And I think that's like one of the biggest modern problems is just how, large and regimented our systems are now, that in most places, most companies, most jobs exist as very, structured cog and, one gear in the machine type of role. And I think leads to a lot of people's like mental health problems and
Yeah, and
lack of fulfillment.
let me just add one more thing. Like, I don't think it has to be that way at all. I think we've almost elected to fill that cog role. Like, many of those roles could be done as like independent contractors. If like more people were just like, I'm going to more so sell my labor as a contractor or like in smaller businesses, I think a lot of firms could be more flexible and essentially like hire tasks out to different contractors. And it really never had to be this way of like big firm, this is your task. I don't think that it has to be this way or it's more efficient, or I don't think any of that's the case. I think it's just many of us have not really thought about it. And it's just like, okay, I go to school so I can get a job. Where's the jobs? Who's got jobs?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the job. And like, just no one really thinks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dale, one thing that you said I wanted to respond to is like, you think that you just think everyone thinks that way, like, oh, would like to get off the dependency kind of. And I actually don't know. I think to an extent that's right. Like, and I know what you're saying. Like, obviously people would prefer more freedom than less, all things equal. But I think the real more interesting question to ask is when things aren't, not keeping things equal, when there is actually the trade-off between, oh yeah, you have more freedom and you get more return, for example, on your time or your capital, your assets. It's like, but there's a lot more risk that comes along with that. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if it's like the product of our environment is kind of a theme that we're talking about, but it's like people are just like, don't seem to be willing to sacrifice that comfort and like stability for that, potentially unlimited upside and also unlimited downside. Like that kind of risk return isn't really, it's there's a lot of people. So I want to say an example. Early in my career, I mean, I'm still early in my career probably, but like this is literally a couple months into working. I had a colleague, senior level project manager, and I'm driving with him, and a nice car goes by that like particularly caught my eye. I think it was like a Corvette or something. I was like, oh, nice car. Love to own one of those someday. And this guy's, well on his way in his career. He looks at me, he's just like, better pick a different job than like the job that I'm working with him. Cause like essentially what he's saying to me, it's like, yeah, you're not going to be making that kind of money in this line of work. And I'm just like, okay, that might very well be the case, but it's like, you're like 15 years ahead of me in this experience. And you think that it's like, don't you like, to me, it's like at some point, right, you're going to like shift gears and you're going to like try to own part of what you're doing and, start to leverage your time, leverage your assets in a way that you can actually get some free cash flow and you can start spending on some cool things. And it's just like, to me, that was just a given at the time. And obviously I'm still young, and in the story I was even younger. So it's kind of, you're just a young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you don't know the real world. You haven't gotten your dose of reality yet. But it's just like, to me, I was just like, you still got to like think that you're open to that. It's like, yeah, I'm in my line of work, but I
Right.
can get promoted and I can get, but he was just resigned. He was just, yeah, it's like, oh, we make our salary and we do what we do and we punch in. And I love this guy. I mean, if he's listening, he might not even remember saying that. It might have just been an offhand comment, but, um, it just was like a shocker to me. I'm just like, yeah, I am in this line, but I'm not resigned to just never.
Yeah, that's like so depressing and lame. But like, I mean, to like right off the bat, like my reaction to that is so negative. I'm like, man, everyone should be like aspiring to like,
Right.
have the financial freedom to do whatever the hell they want. Like, how are you ever gonna say like, nah, that like having a Corvette's too lofty of a goal? Like, hell no. Like, it seems should be super within reach. But to your point, I do think not everyone needs like to find fulfillment in their job. Like a lot of people can. It's easy to imagine a parent with children who values security and a low risk job with a healthy pay in the form of a salary over being an entrepreneur and taking on their own risks because they get their fulfillment out of their kids and their family and their home life and whatever like outside of work activities they have, and the work just kind of pays the bills to allow them to have that lifestyle, and that's a fulfilling life. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and that can be a good and happy life. So there are alternatives, but that's not for me.
Yeah, I completely agree
Yeah.
with that because, I mean, just take any sort of professional skill, like a dentist, for example, right? This is like a type of job where you can just be self-employed, right? Like you could have a one-room building or whatever in like an office complex, and you just see patients, and you're completely like self-employed, and just whatever you bring in is what you get paid. And you may not even have anyone under you, so it's not even really like a business. Like you just own your labor essentially, right? Not everyone wants to do that, right? Like some people would rather work for the dentist firm, have a consistent salary, and not worry about it. A lot of people would much rather have, like you said, low risk than even like I wouldn't even call like self-employed being an entrepreneur because you're not really starting a business. It's like you're just self-employed, right? Like not even everyone wants to be self-employed, even if that was theoretically the efficient way to do things. Some people are just happy to trade risk for reward. They would rather just hand the risk over to you and get paid less. And so for that reason, I think it's perfectly fine if you want to do that. Like, it's just, it's up to the individual. But my issue was I like risk. I just I never conceived of that as being realistic. Like I thought of like startups as like a pipe dream that like people were only kidding themselves. And you don't even have to have a startup. You can add to a business in like, an incremental way that isn't just doing what you're told, right? Like you can actually expand the revenue streams of a business on your own and then
Right.
like get a piece of that yourself by getting a big raise that's from that new incremental revenue stream. And so like there's now like a raise available to you that wouldn't have existed without you being there. So it's not super risk heavy, but just the idea of being able to add value in your own way, just I don't know, I like growing up I had never really conceived of it. And then so I just feel like we don't do a good enough a job, I think, of just conveying to people at a young age, I guess, what it means to be, I don't know, just a productive member of society. It can be many different things, I guess.
Right.
So I want to,
And I think
I do want to clarify. So when like when you guys are kind of bifurcating, like, oh, some people are going to seek entrepreneurship and some people are going to trade time for salary, and those people are, have fulfillment in other ways. It's like, I don't think you can draw the line because I think it's a mirage is what I'm trying to say. I think like people that like to sacrifice freedom for comfort, it's like our workplace, I guess in the last whatever 50, maybe even 100 years, our workplace environments, the modern workplace environment, kind of makes it seem like you can make that trade, and like the people that receive the salaried position, the comfortable position, it's like, oh, I'm owed this. Like all I have to do is X, Y, Z, and they told me if I do that to this, a satisfactory level, then I'm owed my salary, and it's like you've just traded the risk, and it still exists. Like it's not, you're not owed anything, right? So it's just like I think that this idea that you can like you can live your life and you can just like kind of autopilot some of it, and it's like I just don't think it's real. Like it's almost like fake to me. Like it's like you gotta.
You're saying there's even risk in the regular 9 to 5.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean it's
you've
been
essentially
suppressed.
you've squashed the risk into the event of getting fired, essentially.
Or that
The risk is still there.
Yeah, the risk of like your sector completely gets, I don't know.
Right. Well, laid off, fired,
Yeah,
laid
right.
off.
Loss of job.
Essentially, you've squashed the risk into a more unlikely event, but it's. Yeah,
still
no,
there.
actually, you make a really good point because it's, you're not seeing the ups and downs of the revenue stream, but if that revenue stream drops low enough, you're getting laid off,
Right,
so it's
you
not
get all
like
the downside.
you're still getting all the downside. You're
Yeah.
just missing out on the upside. So, I mean, you make a good point there.
Yeah, it's like someone who's like
Right.
actively trading options, like, oh, I'm just trying to make it, and then someone else is like, oh no, I only sell out of the money options. It's like I'm safe. I'm selling out of the money options. I don't. I just get my steady income. It's like, yeah, you do until that day that
Until you don't.
those out of the money options go in the money, and then it's like everything you've gotten, everything, all the premiums you've collected, you owe. And so it's like.
True. But you're not going to lose money from getting fired. You're just not going to make money.
If you've invested
That's
enough of your capital, or like if you've pigeonholed yourself in a way, then
true. If you have to like retrain yourself or something,
yeah,
then I could see that.
Yeah, and I think the other point is that like you are passing the risk on to the other decision makers. So like your employer can make poor business decisions that make your job go away, as opposed to the kind of self-employed entrepreneur is making those decisions themselves and deciding what risks to take.
Yeah, I mean, I've always sort of gravitated towards having more responsibility. Like, it's not even like money for me. Like, that's not. I don't like seek out higher pay or like bigger monetary reward. It's like I just want to be holding the wheel, and I've always sort of felt that way. Like, I've never really liked team sports as much as I liked like wrestling growing up, because I just wanted to have essentially control of the ship.
Win or lose, yeah.
Yeah, and I just always sort of felt that way.
And even like the people that we're referring to in this conversation were those entrepreneurs who are actually self-actualizing into like this mogul. And it's like even them, they're like, it's like, oh, you've accrued all this capital. What do you do with it? And it's like, oh, I have a money manager who invests in mutual funds, and it gives me I get it gets me 1% alpha each year, and that's my expectation of him. And it's just like so it's like you started like you've accrued all this capital, and then you just handed it off, and then just it's like even those people who are holding the wheel, as you said, Jeff, aren't even holding the wheel in terms of like what what they're actually the way they're extended.
What they're invested in.
No, I know. It's not everyone, but it's
probably,
just the concept of.
Those people are probably more likely to be making the decisions for their capital allocations than your average person.
Certainly, but I just think that my what I'm trying to convey is like these trade-offs and these decisions we're making. Like, oh, I'd rather have some security in this area or in this area, and in that way. It's just like, I think that's all mirage. Like this conversation of like, how do you self-actualize, how do you self-help, it's gonna be hard, and you got to learn things. You got to, you can't just assume someone else has your back. You don't have to be paranoid in the way that makes it sound, but it's like you gotta step up to the plate.
You're always at risk. Yeah.
Like if you strip it down to its like the base level, like the least number of variables, right? Like get away from our extremely complex society, right? It's like, let's say you're just on like an island. You eat what you kill, what you gather, essentially. So it's what you get to eat is completely dependent on you. And let's say there's like a couple more people there. They're not going to just let you eat more than you input, Eventually,
Right.
They're going to be like, this guy's not providing enough. And you're going to have to do something to make what you're getting out equivalent to what you're putting in.
Mm-hmm.
And like, in modern society, like there's this concept of like leverage where it's like you can get insane returns on what seems like not a lot of input, but it's just because you're providing something to many, many, many people. But ignoring that, like, just if you think about it, it's ultimately, there's no way to get around the fact that you can't get more out than what you're putting in unless you're cheating someone.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean by mirage. Like, we have so many people out there. When by my analysis, it's like there's so many people getting out all this comfort and risk-free, all these risk-free promises, and it's just like, wait, at the end of the day, who's really like the one obviously there are people. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it's just like, to me, I think there's more of what you're referring to, Jeff, as like the taking more than they give, in terms of, and that's oversimplified. Like, I'm not saying that people are greedy or whatever. I'm just trying to say, like, it's again, I'll say it's a mirage. Like, people think that their lives are a certain way and they're owed something. It's like, and what they're providing, it's like, well, just take a second. How much of what you're providing are you actually responsible for and are actually like on the hook for, or and feel that risk? It's like, do you understand all the risks, and do you understand, like, there may be more than you're actually thinking about?
Right. Like, one way I've always kind of thought about it is, like, when it comes to people getting canceled and stuff like that, it always seems like it's people who are in some ways superfluous. Like, it's so much harder to cancel the guy that keeps your lights on,
Yeah.
Because it's like,
Right.
I'm not going to cancel the guy that makes sure my home is heated and my lights are on,
Yeah.
And so like, part of that is related to is what is the value I'm providing? And if it's tremendous, then people are going to come to you no matter what. And so, like, if you are like sort of superfluous to people, like they can live without you, then yeah, like you shouldn't count on that salary, because they could just be like, do we really need this position? But if they really do need you, that job's not going anywhere.
Right. That's such a good point. It's like, to your analogy, like, of the island, it's like, oh, this guy's wearing socks and sandals, man. Can you believe it? It's like, dude, shut up. He's getting all the firewood for this whole island. Don't say anything. And then it's like you walk in with socks and sandals one day, and everyone's just like, get the heck out of here. We don't want you. It's like,
right.
It's like, get that unfashionable crap out of here. We don't need you anymore. We're good on our own.
Like, all you do is make like sand castles. They're like, get that low fashion.
That's the last straw.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can make those sand castles, but we're not going to look at those your socks and sandals.
At what cost will you accept socks and sandals in your society? The ultimate question.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's
anyway.
That perfectly wraps up my point, because that's like what I'm trying to say. Like, if you show up one day and you just do something completely ancillary to like what you're supposed to be doing, but it's like, oh, that was what stirred the water, and that was what made people upset with me, and I got fired over that or something. It's just like, or I could get fired if I. It's more of like a thought experiment to do it with yourself. It's like if I don't send my boss an email exactly the way he likes the formatting, and then I might get fired for that. It's just like, is that really important to what you're doing? Like, that's pretty much as arbitrary as like what footwear you wear to your sandcastle building job. So it's like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I feel like we got a little off topic there at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's still somewhat related.
Somewhat related.
No, I liked it. I mean,
I did have one thing to say on kind of your initial Dale, the initial topic was like people tend to kind of carry forward their success. So like you'll see, like especially with like social media, where there's like a tendency to like post like, oh hey guys, today I'm taking my first step of 1,000-step journey. It's like I'm gonna lose the weight this time, and then but I'm posting the before picture. So here I go on my journey, and it's like actually that's not a good thing to do. I'm not calling anyone out for doing this. Like everyone, just feel free to do whatever you want. But like, there's actually like a mentality of if I'm posting the before pic and telling everyone I'm on the journey, there's actually like a part of your brain that's like, good for me, I'm doing it. I'm really doing it. I wanted to do this for so long, and I'm actually starting to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like posting the before pic is kind of like you're almost succeeding in your own brain. And
it gives you the social pressure to stick to it.
Well, there's that.
No,
So
I think John's saying the opposite.
Yeah, the opposite.
Right?
Well, I think.
So if you're posting that with the sole purpose of like, hey, everybody, call me out if I don't do it. If that's the culture, then it's like, okay, then that actually might work, because that's very powerful that's very powerful to have social pressure to do something. Like if you say to people, it's okay to call me out if I don't finish this, because I'm steadfast in this goal, and then people actually do that, it's like you're much more likely to succeed. But the idea like, oh, I'm on my journey, here I go, and then people say like, good for you, congratulations, this is such a good
yes queen.
Yeah, it's like it's like no.
That reminds me, like I find I'll like randomly come across like a lot of Instagram fitness models that are just like in okay shape.
Yes,
it's like
randomly
super like average. Yeah, right. Like, but like no, seriously, you'll see people that you're like, okay, you look like you're in like pretty like normal looking healthy body, but you're not like, you don't look like you're a CrossFit champion. Like, why is this like your lifestyle?
You got to hold them to their goals. Call them out.
Yeah, really.
No, but it's just like so that's kind of goes to what I did say this, but it goes towards that concept of like, if you're listening to someone who's making you happy, then you should actually stop listening to them, because unless you're actually, if you're super accomplished, then it's like, okay, listen to people that make you happy. But if you like at night you think about all the things you want to do in your life, which I hope most of the people that are listening to this do, because there's so much things to do there. It's like you can do whatever you want, and if at night you want to do things and you haven't accomplished those yet, you should do what makes you accomplish those, which is not feel happy today. You should feel sad today,
right,
until you accomplish those things.
Yeah, Naval said that desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what it is that you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant. Because it makes you really think about. It's not to say don't desire anything. That's not the point of that quote. The point of that quote is be selective with what you desire, right? Because being unhappy is a powerful motivator, like John's saying. So you should make sure what you're desiring is worth it, right? Because you're gonna make yourself miserable trying to get it. So it better be worth it, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we're gonna hop off.
No, that's a good place to end.
Yeah. Well said, right. Jeff. Well said, Naval.
So give us money. We're coming out with a self-help book.
This is our first step.
Say you're doing too much. Start doing less, and then you're gonna feel real good because you're not doing anything. Yeah. And then you just keep that subscription up to do less, and you'll be happy.
Yeah.
That's right. Just take that first step and buy it. Just
All right.
give us your money.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone.
everybody.